So this is the OneLaser XRF, a brand new desktop CO2 machine. Now, I recently ranked pretty much every single desktop CO2 machine on the market, and then this one I actually had tied for number 1. But I was just looking at all of the stats online. Now we actually have this thing in the shop, so let's see if this thing can live up to the hype. All right, so the CO2 desktop laser cutter and engraver market is probably one of the most popular. This form factor people seem to really like, because you can get some pretty good size material inside of it. You've got plenty of power not only to engrave, but also to cut. Also having a fully enclosed box means this is a lot safer than the alternative like open gantry diode style machines. So a lot of manufacturers have been putting out machines like this. And there's really kind of two different ways to approach it. First is going to be the manufacturers that maybe have a more budget diode style machine, and they basically upgrade that machine and pull it up to a desktop CO2. A really great example of this would be like the Atom Stack Hurricane, where you really can feel more of the budget roots in that machine. And I'm calling that category of machines the hobby heroes. They're basically like the best version of like a hobby style machine that you can get. Some other really good examples of this would be the OMTech Polar, a super popular machine that actually came out a couple years ago now. But then also the Gweek Cloud, which is pretty much the same machine as the OMTech Polar and the OMTech Polar Plus. Then even a much more expensive machine, the xTool P2 and P2S. The kind of the second category of machines is what this thing reflects. It's basically taking the larger cabinet style lasers that are on the pro industrial end and scaling it down to fit onto a desk. So like a great example of this would be what I have like right next to me. It's not lit up as well, but the Thunderbolt, which is a great machine, or even like the Mira line from Aeon. But then also I would put OneLaser and their X series into this category as well. In this category, I'm going to call the Mini Pros. Now there's pros and cons to both of those approaches, but let's see how OneLaser fits in specifically on the price side, because that's probably one of the most impressive things about this machine. Okay, so starting off with price. We'll basically have two versions of this. One is going to be a glass CO2 DC direct current tube. They're calling that the OneLaser XF. That's going to be right at $3,000. But then you can also get a RF CO2 tube, which is actually what I have on this machine in the back. We'll talk a lot more about that here in a sec. And they're calling that the OneLaser XRF. And that adds $1,000 onto the price. So now we're going up to $4,000. Now, since this machine has just launched, they're running like a deal through the end of the year. So this price could change, but I wanted to give you the comparison with how it looks right now. The OMTech Polar Plus, which is basically their Polar machine, but they add in a few features, and then they especially add a touchscreen interface like this machine has, is also $3,000. Now, one difference with that kind of gets a little confusing is that includes shipping. All of the lasers that we're going to talk about other than OneLaser, this price is going to include shipping. Currently, the OneLaser price does not include that. To ship this to Georgia would be $250. So be sure to actually go through the checkout cart to see what the price is going to look like specifically for you. Now, moving on in price is going to be that Thunderbolt, which also is going to be an RF tube on the back, so more expensive, and that's going to be right at $5,500. So $1,500 more than this machine. And then going even higher from there is going to be the xTool P2S, the brand new updated machine, and that is going to be $5,700. So the most expensive one that we are going to be talking about. Now, you are going to find some machines that are cheaper than this, specifically the Atom Stack Hurricane, the Gweek Cloud that we've talked about, and then you can get up into like the $9,000 range for like the Aeon, Mira, and the RF tubes. So on the price side, this is basically at the bottom end for the glass tube as well as the RF tube, which is pretty wild as we start to go through the features that this thing has. Now, I'm going to be talking about this machine quite a bit because there are a lot of similarities between these two machines. Now, really the biggest difference between these two machines is like the overall shapes, because I have their version of a riser. They're calling it the Base Boost. This is $500. We'll go into the features here in a second. That's something you don't have to do with the Bolt. Already has a really good depth that you can see like right under there. And another thing the Bolt has that you would have to add on to this is an inline air assist. So this does have an integrated air pump in the back inside of the machine, but with the way this thing is set up, they recommend having an inline air assist as well, which is basically something like this, and these are around like $60. So if you add in the cost of the bass boost, 500 bucks, the air assist, the 60 bucks, and then the shipping, $250, you're really looking at about a $700 difference between this machine and this machine. So it's still a good bit cheaper than the Bolt, even when you add in some of those other accessories. Now, as we are getting into this, as with most of the machines that I review, they have been sent to me. I did not pay for this machine. OneLaser is not paying me to make this review, and I do have an affiliate relationship with them. Here's my code if you want to use it to help support this channel, and probably in the future there may be some discounts tied to it as well. Okay, so now let's actually talk about this machine. And again, that is like everything here up. And the build quality of this is excellent. They have a full metal enclosed frame. That's compared to like a hard, nice plastic that you might find with the xTool P2. It's got a really thick polycarbonate top. It isn't glass, which is what you will find on like the super high-end machines, but you do get kind of the nice added benefit of the fact that it's curved, so you don't have to have any type of like support right here for the different panes of glass, and so you have a lot more visibility. It is pretty dark, and it's probably going to show up differently on camera. You can totally see inside the machine, but this isn't straight clear, so that is going to probably protect you from some of the flashbacks that you might get from the laser, even though this is like an invisible laser beam, but it's not going to be like straight clear that you might find in other type of machines. It's got a pretty common feature that we're finding on a lot of these style machines, and that is this pull-out tray that is sitting right underneath a removable honeycomb bed. I have to have this door shut so I can actually pull the tray out. That's why I had opened that up. You've got a rotary hookup on the back, which you definitely will need to have this like bass boost riser to be able to fit. I believe they're using Pyburn as their recommended rotary of choice. That will be an additional purchase. But just in general, the build quality is excellent, and I would say on par with the Thunderbolt. So definitely way better than what you're going to find with the OMTech Polar and like the Weak Cloud. And then a different style design, but I would say a more rigid and robust design than what you're going to find with the xTool P2 and P2S. Now, the build quality compared to the Bolt is where things start to get interesting, and where I need to give you a little bit of background about this company. So basically, OneLaser has a really good partnership with Thunder Laser, and they're actually using a lot of their same manufacturing lines overseas. OneLaser is still based in the US, so they are in California, and they do all the design and engineering work there, and the support, which is a big thing, is also US based. But because you have a lot of crossover on the manufacturing side, there are a lot of components I actually find that are crossovers between each as well. Now this is a pre-production unit, so this could change, but little things like these gas struts, like the internal lights, like the exact same that you have on the Thunderbolt. Bigger things like the camera look to be the same, and even like the stamped steel frame looks like it's like the same gauge, the same type of powder coat. So you can definitely tell they're coming from pretty much the same place. Now a bigger similarity is the actual gantry itself. So like what moves this laser head all around pretty much looks identical to the one you're going to find in the Bolt. There are going to be some external adjustment screws, so if you have to realign your laser, they're going to make that really easy. That was the thing xTool made a big deal about when the P2S released, but this has this built in right off the bat. And an even bigger thing specifically to the RF version is the RF tube on the back is the same 38 watt tube that you're going to find with the Bolt. There's been some like discrepancy online. I think Thunder calls it 30, OneLaser calls it 38. And I was actually talking with the CEO of OneLaser, and he was giving me the specific wattage readouts. And however you want to rate it, it's like exactly the same one. And here's a picture of both machines' backs so you can see that they are identical. Now there are a lot of similarities with the Thunderbolt, but there are also several things that are unique specifically to this machine. And to start off, let's talk about this riser here that this is sitting on. Now in terms of shipping, you will have to assemble this riser. They give you all the screws and instructions. It doesn't take super long. Where the laser itself comes fully assembled right out of the box. So I like set it up, turned it on, and ran it, and everything was good to go. I didn't have to do any alignment, pretty much anything to it. And because this is an RF machine, I didn't have to worry worry about filling up like a water reservoir on the back to cool the glass tube because it doesn't have one. But this is a great quality riser. There's actually a plate running towards the back that is like a 30mm aluminum block to keep everything rigid and into place. If you've ever used the riser from xTool, they don't have that, so it can kind of get a little bit wobbly as the machine is going. But this is a great thing they've added to this because this machine can move very fast, and we'll get into the speed here in a sec. And this can fold down on the front as well as the back. And then when you do that, you're gonna have access to a bunch of different slots that then you can drop this tray in, to where more than likely you're gonna have a rotary or a really thick piece of material that you're gonna be engraving on top of. Currently, the honeycomb bed that comes with the machine isn't gonna fit inside of this tray, but you're really not gonna cut once you're getting thicknesses way down here. Now, another unique feature, especially compared to the Bolt, is this removable cover for the laser head. This is something you're gonna find on the OMTech Polar as well as the xTool P2 and P2S, but something that none of those have, and really a feature I've only seen on the really high-end machines like the Redline series from Aeon, is a removable lens, and it attaches with a magnet. And this is great because not only could you change out a lens to have different like focal distances, so you can have like a smaller or a thicker beam depending on what you want to do, but especially for maintenance, it makes it really easy to pop this out. They give you all this stuff to clean it and then drop it right back in. So this is a really, really cool feature that you don't have on any machine, including the Bolt. Another great feature that is unique to this machine is how it does autofocus. Yes, it does have autofocus, but it's doing it in like the best way possible. And that is by doing a touch probe where the laser head itself is the touch probe. So you may not be able to see this in camera, but I'll show you a clip of it running. When you go to focus, this will drop down, touch off on the head. Once it senses it, then it knows where it needs to dial in focus from there. And that is compared to a bunch of different ways that other manufacturers do it. The OMTech Polar, and I'm not sure about the current Polar Plus, doesn't have an autofocus. When they say autofocus, all they mean is they have a motorized Z-axis. So you can control what the Z is, but you still have to type into the software what the thickness of the material is to figure out where the focus distance is. So that's kind of annoying. The xTool P2 uses some like witchcraft and laser magic and cameras, shoot a laser and bounce it around in the dark and figure out what the thickness is, which works fine. And then the Bolt has a touch probe, but it's like a separate sensor that's attached to the head. It's not using the actual cone where the laser is coming out. Now, another feature that is unique to just this machine is an air quality sensor. And so that is what this readout is, where I'm getting temperature and some air quality readouts. And you can actually follow the sensor, and it's a little like blue purple guy they have mounted to the machine itself. But that's really handy, especially in the desktop market, because you probably are going to be running this indoors, and maybe you aren't going to be in a big like shop space like I am. This could be like living inside of a craft room or an office. So it's always great to have a quick readout just to see how your air is doing. And then speaking of air, another nice feature that this has is not only air assist, which is just like a compressed stream of air. It's helping giving you a really clean cut and putting out any flare-ups that you might have. And that's going to be coming out right here where the laser beam is. So there's a little pump right here on the back, but they also have a connection to where you can put in an external air compressor as well, which is what I have hooked up back here. And that's what this guy is right here. Now, that's not required, but if you're going to be using this more in a pro setting to where you're going to be running this like multiple hours a day, having a dedicated air compressor that can give you a stronger source and more consistent source of air is going to be a big improvement that you can add to your machine, but you don't have to do it. And then probably the most obvious feature, especially when this is closed, is this red light that they've got right here. This is actually a status indicator, so it's going to like pulse and blink to tell you different things are happening. Especially it's going to be like pulsing as it's running, so you know when it's solid that the machine is stopped if you're like looking across the room and you need to change something out. A visual indicator is something no other machine has other than the Bolt. The Bolt actually has like a little light right here, plus it looks pretty cool. Now that external air compressor and the inline fan that are hanging off the machine kind of brings me back to the fact that I'm calling this a Mini Pro, because that external setup is going to be something that's going to be really common with bigger cabinet style machines. And if it's a glass tube, you also have like an air chiller as well. So there's going to be things hanging off the machine that's going to improve its quality, its reliability, and allow you to run it on a pretty much ongoing base in more of like a pro setting versus the hobby hero style machines that are pretty much all in one boxes. And honestly, the Glowforge is probably the best example of that. It's like a single box you pull out and everything you need is right there. But because everything has to be inside of that one machine, a lot of the functionality is going to be limited. So that carries over to the OMTech Polar. And then even with the xTool P2S, they actually have an external inline fan that they are producing that's doing pretty much the same thing that they recommend using with the machine. Now let's talk about the laser itself. Again, you get two options. The XF is going to be a glass CO2 tube, which is going to be 55 watts, which is going to be comparable in power to the Polar Plus. And then I believe the xTool P2S is like in that range. And the RF is going to be the 38 watt that I have on this. Now there are some differences between the two. The glass tube is cheaper, which is why it's $1,000 less, but you also are going to have to keep it chilled with water. So with the glass version, you're going to have a water reservoir inside and a pump that will pump the water around the glass tube. That's something you don't have to do with the RF version. It still is using CO2 gas, but using magic and science, they're able to contain this all within like this metal rectangle. So it's a lot more durable. They typically last longer and it can be air cooled. So there's fans on the back for that. So you don't have to worry about water. Now, in terms of power and performance, I still need to do a side-by-side test, but a lot of manufacturers will say like a 30 to 38 watt RF is comparable to 55 watts on the glass side. The RF actually has a smaller laser dot. So literally if you fire the laser and you compare them side by side, you can see that the actual dot size is going to be smaller. So even though it has less wattage, that wattage is compressed into a smaller space, so the power kind of balances out. Now, benefit you do get from the smaller dot size is this will be better for engraving. So just like when you look at a picture and they're talking about dots per inch or DPI, you basically kind of have the same settings, and you can go a lot higher with an RF tube versus a glass tube. Actually, here are the stats on those different beam sizes. Now, I showed you that the laser source on this is the exact same as the bolt. In these pictures, you can see there's this like little black nozzle on the front, and that is on the bolt. So that's actually called a beam expander, and there is a dial that allows you to adjust kind of how the beam is working. And that's nice because you're going to get a more consistent and quality beam across the full length and width of the machine. I don't have that on this one, but OneLaser did let me know that's something they are going to be providing in the future when they actually ship these units out to paying customers. And that's something you really don't have with a glass tube. Another great feature as well is they have an inline red laser dot. Hopefully you can kind of see it popping up on my hand. And so that is going to be positioning, especially when you are framing around whatever you're going to engrave or cut out. Basically can run a box around it, or you can even run an outline. And because the laser is invisible, you can't actually fire a low-powered version of the laser beam. That's what like the diode machines do. So to get around that, CO2 manufacturers will add a red laser dot. Now, sometimes that red laser dot will actually just be like a little laser pointer that you kind of have pointed towards where hopefully the laser beam is going to be cutting out. And a lot of times what you have to do is align that red laser dot to where the actual laser beam is coming out. They've actually put that in line of the laser beam itself. So it gets generated right here, bounces through a series of mirror, and that is where you've got your red laser dot. So as I'm putting my hand right here, you can see it reflected because it's reflecting through that set of mirrors. And what that really means is wherever you see that is exactly where your beam is going to come out, making it really easy to position and size things out. Now you still do have a camera, and this is basically like a Lightburn camera, which is the software that you are going to use. So on the back, you're going to have a separate connection for the camera itself that's going to be going to your computer. So if you plug this in, you're actually going to be going into 2 ports, which is kind of annoying, but that's a Lightburn specific thing. And while the camera is great for like quick positioning and like seeing and layout and seeing where things are going to go, I find I just use that red laser beam and do some framing to figure out where I need things to go. I find it tends to be more exact, and most of the times I can get things done about as fast as I can with a fully integrated camera system, which is a big advantage of what xTool has with the P2. They have like an overall view, but then you can get a really close and accurate view of what the laser is doing, and that is completely over Wi-Fi into their software, so you don't have to have like multiple connections. And we'll definitely talk more about software, especially with xTool here in a minute as it compares to Lightburn. Okay, the laser power works hand in hand with the speed of the machine itself. itself. And we're going to break the speed into actual speed as well as acceleration. For speed, you actually have two different ones depending on if you're getting the XT glass tube or the XRF. The glass tube is going to be limited to 800 millimeters per second. Now, and I bet that's actually a limit they're putting on the firmware side of things, because I would imagine the actual gantry and the motors and stuff is the same, because on the XRF, you can bump that all the way up to 1200. As means of comparison, the Polar Plus is 500 millimeters per second, the P2S is 600 millimeters per second, and then the Bolt is 1000 millimeters per second. So the glass version of this is going to be faster than pretty much all of the Hobby Hero style machines, where the RF version of this is going to be faster than even the Thunderbolt. The only one it doesn't beat in terms of speed is going to be, again, the Redline series from Aeon. I think that max is 2000 millimeters per second. They're actually using like closed loop servo motors, but also that's with the RF version, which is like $9,000. So like more than double the price of this. Now, acceleration is where things really get interesting, because that's a stat that I honestly didn't first think about when I was getting into lasers. And this definitely applies to engraving. If you're doing like big pictures, this is going to be going back and forth a lot. So how quickly it can stop and then start is going to make a really big impact in terms of time. Now, I actually need to do this test, but after the Dodgers won the World Series, OneLaser actually engraved like a big Dodger image using the P2S and then the RF, and there's a pretty substantial time savings. And so while it does have higher speed, the acceleration between the two machines is pretty drastic. Typically, manufacturers will measure this in terms of G's, so like the force of gravity. And so this guy is 3G, so 3 times the force of gravity, whatever that converts over to the units that you want to use. The Polar Plus is 0.5 or 1/2 G, so 6 times acceleration on this machine. And then the P2S is 0.7 G, so still not even 1 G. And this is going to be identical to what Bolt has at 3G. Again, coming back to like the full gantry assembly, and the best that I can tell, pretty much the motors are the same between these two machines. All right, let's talk about work area. This is going to be tied for the biggest work area. This is 24 by 12, which is going to be the same that you find with the xTool P2. It's actually bigger than what you're going to get with the Polar Plus as well as the Bolt. And I'm just talking about like the X and the Y, or like the size of the Honeycomb itself. So pretty much like the biggest you can get for a desktop style machine. I think the AtomStack Hurricane is a hair bigger, but still a really, really good size. And in terms of material, 24 by 12 or like 12 by 20 is a pretty common size. Now I'm holding this up because I want to show you that on the back side down here, you have a few positioning knobs, and this actually slots directly into the metal work bed itself. So this locks into place. So if you have like a jig set up on this where maybe you're using magnets and things are stuck down, even when you're using this machine at those super high speeds, you're not going to lose your position because this is just locked into space. Now the Honeycomb Bed is going to be a really similar setup to the other machines, but I'll actually give the advantage to xTool on the P2 and the P2S. They are using slats, so metal slats that are built into the frame that you can move around and position into different spots. And that's pretty much like identical to what you're going to find on the Pro high-end style machines, but because you have really big gaps between them, especially if you're doing like smaller cuts, you can find your entire pieces will fall through those slats. So a lot of times I found myself having to put like honeycomb on top of those slats. So it's like a give and take between those. Next up, let's talk about the interface and the controller. And this is going to be the cleanest break between our beginner heroes and our mini pros, because pretty much all of the mini pros that we have talked about are going to be using a G-code based controller. And while those controllers are going to save you on cost, they're not going to be as nice as the controllers you're going to find on the pro style machines, which are typically DSP based controllers. Those are going to have higher processing speeds, going to give you more accuracy, better control of the laser itself, even while it's running. So everything, including the xTool P2S, is a G-code based controller. And most of the times, that's why you won't find any type of interface built into the machine itself. Or if you do, it's pretty basic. I know the new OMTech Polar Plus has an interface, but I haven't been able to test that out. But I'm pretty sure they're still using like a G-code based controller to run it. Where with the Mini Pros, all of those are going to be DSP based. And this does have a nice touchscreen interface. and you're gonna have access to like all of the controls you need to run the machine, even if you don't have this connected to a computer. If you already have the files uploaded to the memory of the machine and you have access to like a file menu in there, you can like open it up, drop in your material, move this around. You can focus it, which is what it's doing right now. It's gonna touch off. Good to go. You have quick access to setting the origin, and then you can just start it and you're gonna be good to go. I don't even know what is in here, but it's about to do something. And this kind of brings us to the safety side of things. You have to have this completely shut or the laser will cut off. Something that's really handy too is you just shut it. It's gonna start off right off the bat, so that is really handy. And now it might be a little bit louder now because I had to turn on my inline fan as well as my compressor. So again, I have those hooked up as separate, and then you can just jog it out of the way and take out whatever I just engraved, which was just on the scrap sheet of material, and you're good to go. So it's great you have access to all the controls you need directly on the machine itself. That's something I definitely miss on any of those beginner hero style machines when I'm testing them out. Now, compared to the Bolt, the Thunderbolt, this one right here, actually has the nicest interface of any machine I have. That includes my bigger industrial style machines. That one will actually give you an image preview. The menus are really nice. This gets the job done. It's not quite as big, but the Bolts is super nice. Now, another category I compared the machines and the manufacturers across was the support. So like the customer support you'd get if you had a problem with your machine or you weren't getting like the quality engrave or cut that you thought you should be getting. And I pretty much ranked OMTech at the lowest. You can get support, but usually it's overseas. So while those machines are great, especially at their price point, all the troubleshooting and figuring out, you're gonna have to be like digging through forums and asking questions to other users. Going up from there, xTool is a little bit better. You still don't have like direct support as much, and all of it pretty much is based in China. But I would say it's a little bit nicer because a lot more people have those machines, so you can find the answers a lot better, and their website works a little bit better as well. And that's pretty much across the board with those beginner hero style machines, other than Glowforge, which is like US based. But I've heard a lot of people having issues with Glowforge just support in general. Now, Thunder support, specifically Thunder USA, those guys are awesome, and actually talked specifically about an issue I had with this machine in my review. I got on the phone with them. They walked me through everything I needed to do. We were good to go. And OneLaser is saying that they are going to be offering US-based support, and they seem pretty excited about it, that being a huge selling point of going with this brand. Because this is a pre-release before any of these machines come out, as a review, I can't tell you my opinion on it, but if what they say about the features and the quality of the machine also goes to the quality of the support, I think you're gonna be in really good hands. And one way you can see what a manufacturer thinks about their machine is on the warranty. So typically you get like longer warranty on machines that are nicer, so they already know you're not going to need as much support. And they're offering a 3-to-1 warranty support. So 3 years on like the overall machine itself, 2 years on the electrical, and then 1 year on the laser source. That is as good, if not better, than anything else you're going to find out there. A lot of times you're just going to get 1 or 2 years on support, and then sometimes you'll see longer and or extended warranties, but that's going to be with like the super high-end brands like Trotec and Epilogue. But outside of the warranty, going back to support, they are saying you're going to get like lifetime support with your machine. Now, are there some things with this machine I think they can improve? Yes, sorta, but the issues really have to do with the core category of the Mini Pro. So these are things that just kind of come with a pro style machine versus more something that is on the hobby beginner style. And that is starting with software. This supports the industry standard Lightburn as well as the free RD Works. And Lightburn is what you're going to use with pretty much any other machine other than the xTool P2 and Glowforge. And that's where the big advantage of the hobby heroes come in just their ease of use to someone who has never used a laser before. xTool especially, their software has come a really, really long way, and it is fairly easy to use and it's pretty feature rich. They're doing some pretty crazy stuff with their cameras, using like online processing, where it'll do like automatic positioning based off material it can already see in the workbed. This stuff that you're really not going to find in Lightburn. Where on the pro side, Lightburn opens you up to like all of the features of the machine. So you're going to be able to get the best result possible. A good example of the negative of this with xTool is actually with their new P2S. So they had like a spec bump in terms of speed and I think acceleration. And actually looking at the machine itself, it was still the exact same machine. That was actually an unlock they did on the software side. So that was something they were actually limiting on their end. With our Mini Pros, you're not gonna have that. You're gonna be able to like dig into all of that inside of Lightburn. But if you're brand new to it, Lightburn can be pretty overwhelming. But if you are new to Lightburn and you are picking up a machine, I actually have a full video that walks through like the basics to get you up and running right up there. Now, outside of software, a few of the other things that kind of speak to the fact that this is a shrunk down pro machine have to do with the actual external fan. So they provide you a fan and that screws in and connects on the back side of the machine, but that fan doesn't turn off. So whenever you have the machine turned on, you have an exhaust fan running, which if you're in a big shop space, maybe that noise isn't an issue for you, but I can definitely see it being an issue if you are in more of a home residential setting. And actually what I have done, I have it screwed in, but I actually have the electrical connection undone because again, I'm using that inline fan, which is what they are really recommending to pull the exhaust through like the full ducting to take everything outside. And the air assist kind of plays into that to where they're going to recommend using an external air compressor to get stronger and more consistent pressure as you're using this more in a pro setting. So I think like the huge selling point of these desktop style machines is it's a machine that sits on your desktop. It's like an all-in-one box. But as OneLaser is scaling down from more of a pro style setup to really run this machine at its maximum abilities, they're gonna have some things that are like hanging off of it and some potential additional things that you might want to pick up. But again, you don't have to get those if you don't want to. It's just gonna make your setup even better. And then the last thing that I'll mention, and this is something that the Bolt has that I found is really, really handy to basically access anything inside of the machine. These panels have a little latch. Pop it open, and you have direct access to all the electronics if you need to troubleshoot. So you can do the same thing with these panels. They're just screwed in, so you're gonna have to take out several screws to get those panels out. So the easy access is super nice on the Bolt. But again, not like a requirement for this machine, but if I had to find maybe another potential improvement, that could be something they can add down the road. All right, so at the end, does this machine live up to the hype? And I would definitely say yes. You're basically getting a Mini Pro style machine for the price of a hobby hero, especially if you're doing the glass tube version without the riser. This machine is the exact same price as an OMTech Polar Plus. And I could see absolutely no reason to go with the OMTech Polar Plus versus this. Now, I know they definitely want to compare side by side with the xTool P2S. And that's where things get a little bit more tricky. Now, pound for pound in terms of the quality of the build, the features of the machine itself, side by side, this is a much better machine, and it's going to be a good bit cheaper. Now, one thing that xTool has going for it is really their software and the tight integration they have into their camera system, just making it a really easy machine to use. But if you want to get a CO2 desktop laser, this is going to be the best that you can get at a pretty crazy price. All right, what do you think about this machine? Let me know down in the comments, especially since this is brand new. What questions do you have about it? I'd love to answer as many as I can. All right, until next time, go make or break something in your shop. See you guys.